within those districts that are achieving at high levels. So I'm going to do another comparison today, and we're staying pretty close to the criteria within the NAACP, even though there's a lot more there in the report card. But the key is to get first things first. I mean, what are we looking at and how are we looking at it so that we can make sure that, we're on top of things. So I'm going to be doing, well, it's 5 o'clock, so we're going to get started. And I'll wait for Mrs. Sidbury. Mrs. Moore, who were the two persons? Do you remember the two persons yesterday that was going to need our help? And I went back and I got a kickback on one email, and I think that was Mr. Hurd. You remember him?
Yes.
I think he was one of the persons that wanted assistance.
And the other is in Mrs. Sidbury's group.
Okay. All right. And that was, I believe that was the principal.
Right.
Okay. All right. So, well, Dr. Nweze, we're going to get started. So today I'd like to welcome everyone to our third day of our story in his story, doing Black History Month. The goal is to showcase best academic practice schools that meet the criteria of the campaign that the NAACP has approved. We have the pleasure of having today on with us the person that led that at the board of directors level. And we also have the person who initially started working on this from the time the call went out to get it done. So I'm going to ask Dr. Nweze if you would open, and Mrs. Moore if you would follow up with that short part of that history.
Thank you so much. Well, let me tell you, I am still excited like it's the first day. It is such an honor to be working and to be able to give back to our children. Our children don't have as much help as any of us would like. I just want to thank each one of you for agreeing to give up your time, your talent, and your dollars to be able to bring to our children those who are in need of help, those who may not need so much help, but they still want to hear from us. And certainly to be sure to have everybody understand that it's the most important thing we can do with our lives is to make sure that somebody follows us that will be able to maintain what we've done and at the same time take it a step further. So thank you for your time and your energy. And I'm looking forward to us working together each day.
Right. Thank you. Mrs. Moore, you want to give us a little bit of history, because I think it's important for, quote, doing Black History Month, for us to understand a little bit of how we got here and what the board has approved for best academic practice models for Black students and why we're doing this presentation.
Yes, I'd like to say good evening to everyone that is on the call. And I would like to first acknowledge and give honor to Dr. ADORA Nweze, who put out the clarion call in December of 2015 at the national conference that was held in Washington, D.C. by the national help me, Jimma, the national
NAACP and Chamber of Commerce.
The National Chamber of Commerce and the National NAACP had joined forces And they were then looking at the gaps that were existing among Black males. They were looking at this because the chamber said that they needed employees that were able to function, and they were not having success when they looked at our Black young men. We listened to what they had to say. The NAACP then joined forces with them. But Dr. Nweze went a step forward, past what they were looking at. She had a vision of what she exactly wanted to be done for Black students. And it was not just for Black young men, it was for Black young men and young women. She wanted to know, what is the path forward for our students? She said that a lot had been said at that particular conference, but what she was looking for was for someone to come up with a plan that will help Black students achieve. She said not just once they get to school, but before the womb and within the womb, within the community, within the home. She wanted information and documentation on every phase of a Black child's life, because it's so important to their development. She took all of the education chairs to dinner. I was then an education chair for the state of Ohio, the state conference education chair. She took us all to dinner. Her words were, "I don't care who does it. I don't care who brings the information back or can get this done. But in listening to what they've had to say about our children bothers me." She said, it disturbs me. She said, we've had a lot of things that the NAACP and others have come up with, and it has just been stated and nothing has been done about it. She says, I want something done. And if one of you or some of you will present something to me that is doable, I will support you in any and every way that I can. I thank her for putting out that clarion call. She has not failed in what she promised. What she promised, she has done. She has gotten everything approved all the way up the chain in the NAACP, and has gotten the approval to move ahead with best practices from Chairman Leon Russell and the National Education Committee and the National Board. I thank her, and I say again, we are proud to have found the path forward. This is the path forward. We are changing the paradigm of the conversation from Black children cannot learn to Black children can learn and are learning. And we are proving this by showing exactly where Black children are achieving and doing well. we want everyone to join this movement and help us help our children, because if we don't do this, it will not get done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Moore. And as Mrs. Moore said, and as you can see on the screen, this was in Washington, D.C., December the 10th, day 1, 2015. So as you can see, this process has been put in motion. The person who put it in motion is here. And now we're going to actually show some of what that is about. We started the initial piece, as Mrs. Moore says. She was the education chair for the State Conference of Ohio at that time under President McNabb. President Roberts took over from President McNabb. And so before I start the best academic practice presentation, President Roberts, would you kind of give a short synopsis of how you took over from President McNabb and moved the task force forward, and so that we can make sure we get everyone on record?
Well, thank you, Jimma. It's been some time ago, and what I actually did, the committee had started to do the work. I believe there was a meeting in Washington with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the NAACP, and that led to Mrs. McNabb being asked to review all of what's going on with our Black children, as my colleague friend C.J. Prentice would say, our babies, and what's going on with them in the classroom. So this journey began, I want to say, around 2018 or 19 with me in 2017, but probably, let me back up, probably started before that, 2015 or so. So really, it's just been a journey to look at, for the first time in my experience, looking at education from a pawpaw and a grandma, Black mother and father's point of view for our babies. And this committee, this task force, has looked at all the school districts in the state of Ohio and determined at least one or two are performing at what we want to perform at, and that is proficient. We continually talk about going from point A to point B, but even point B is not proficient. So the goal of this task force, I believe, is to look at school districts that are proficient and to promote, from a Black family's point of view, what our babies need to be doing to achieve. And I want to thank Dr. Nweze for taking this to the national board, and Jimma for working with her to do that, so we can now have the conversation at the national level. So that's the thought behind it. And as some of you know, I served in the Ohio General Assembly for over 20 years, and we always talked about education and how we're going to improve it. But rarely did we look at it. Legislators did, but rarely did we look at it totally from the perspective of what mama and daddy can do, what we need to do as a community to help our babies be proficient. We can't wait 10 years, as the world's moving right by us. So, Jim, I look forward to the conversation. I also look forward to the board taking this issue up again at its board meeting in a couple of days. So thank you.
Right. Thank you, President Roberts. So what I'm going to do today, and what we're doing right now, is we're now looking at the product. The product being, after all the research that North Carolina, Indiana, Wisconsin, Ohio, Florida, in terms of them taking the lead, we're doing Ohio for the next few days. And yesterday we took a look at Steubenville, President Roberts, as a district, because you set up a meeting with the superintendent and had an NAACP education committee. So we went through them. They are kind of the standard that we're using, where our children not only because our children are achieving in schools, but because that district is a 100% poverty school district. And so taking the task on so we can get rid of the fact at the very beginning that just because it's rated 100% poverty or some other number, that it can't be done. So we're going to actually show that. Dr. Nweze and Mrs. Moore, I chose a school today to present in your honor. And I think you will see why as I begin the process now. I believe as I go through the detail, you'll recognize why it's in your honor. And then once I finish, you can speak to what your thoughts are on it. So at this particular junction, I'm going to bring up on the screen the school that we're dealing with today. And that school is going to be East Garfield Elementary School. And we're looking at achievement. Now, normally, what we would do and what we've been doing is starting with Google when we're training teams. And we start at Google and Google your Department of Education, regardless of which state you're in. Once you Google that and get inside of your particular Department of Education, is you look at schools that are achieving according to that state's criteria. These tests are biased. We know that up front. However, there are schools and teachers and administrators who've taken on that bias, compensated for the bias, removed the barriers, provided the support, and here's where you'll see the end result of that. So in terms of, I'm going to go back to the home advantage here. This is their home picture, and this is a look at these schools are rated from 1 star to 5 stars overall, and then they're individually rated, as you can see, and everything from achievement, which we look at first, and then we look at gap closing, and then we look at finance. There is a myriad of information here that you can go through, but these are the lead items. One, Black people were not allowed to read, so we start with reading English language arts, because once you can read, comprehend, understand, discern, and apply, you can pretty much teach yourself anything. We're going to go to the first category here first in terms of achievement. And there are some dramatic numbers that you will see. So under achievement, what it states is the performance index measures the test results of every student, not just those who score proficient or higher. Schools and districts receive points on the index for every student who takes the test. So this is a composite of all the students, and they go through a calculation, and the calculation is here. There's the ones that are advanced would be like an A+, accomplished advanced, which would be an A, accomplished proficient, which would be at a C level, a D level would be basic and limited. So when you add up these points, as you can see, at this particular school, this elementary school, more than 80% of the students are proficient and above, all the students. That's what these numbers are about. What's interesting about these numbers is that also, based on the numbers and based on the fact that you can now see this is all the students, all the tests, regardless of where they score. So to go along with that, we then go straight to the money issue. And when you look at how much they spend in operating expenditures each year, they're at $6,711 for this particular elementary school. They're spending $4,600 in terms of classroom instruction and $2,000 plus in terms of non-classroom. And I want you to pay particular attention to those numbers. So we're going to go back now and go to gap and the gap closing, which of course a lot of people speak to and speak about, and take a look at the gap closing. These graphs that you see here, the graphs are designed to let you know, number one, this is English language arts here. And let me bring this up so you can get a clear sense. So reading English language arts are on the left, math is on the right. And again, there's something unique about Ohio. Ohio, in terms of its system, is racist from the standpoint of how they established it per law. And I'm bringing that up now because what we have to know is if we start with a factual understanding according to their records, so we took a look at their initial Constitution in 1803, and there's something unique about that, and it's on the Ohio Department of Education website. But that Article 4, Section 1 of the initial Constitution states clearly that only white males 21 and over that had been in the state for a year could vote and do anything and everything that comes with the vote. So we then took that all the way up to when they started public education. And that's important when you look at the numbers here. These dots within these lateral pieces tells you what they expected of the students. So here, multiracial students, they expected them to score at this point here at 76, and they actually scored at 107. Black students, their expectations were that they would score here at 61.9. That's the expectation. That's the benchmark, they said. However, Black students are outperforming the expectation because here, as you can see, they're at 107%. So this is very important to know that in 100% poverty elementary school in Steubenville, Ohio, these particular students are scoring in the top 20% in the state out of over 600 elementary schools and over 3,000 students. So it can be done. They're not only doing it in English language arts, as you can see here, but they're also performing in terms of math. So if you look at the students here, again, Black students were expected to achieve at the 52% level, and they're actually performing at the 94% level. These are real numbers. This is real empirical data. We are inside the website of the Ohio Department of Education. So whether it's the press asking the NAACP about where did you get the data, all the NAACP has to do is refer them to the state website and let them look up. These are Ohio schools. Now let's just take a look again. I want to go back to achievement because I want to do a comparison. When we are looking at promoting best academic practice models and being able to achieve our goal that we have those schools exist. If the schools exist and our kids are achieving, that means that there are teachers in those schools, regardless of race, creed, or color, or gender, that are helping our kids achieve. And that's important for us to know because sometimes they don't get credit because they're under attack as well. So as you can see here, I'm going to go back because I want you to look at this calculation. This calculation here and how they calculated the numbers. 17% of the kids are below proficient. Remember that number. And also remember, they spent about $6,000 per student. And this is something the NAACP will have to grapple with because the comparison I'm going to do is a different elementary school. Mrs. Moore, do you see Taft Elementary School?
Yes.
Taft Elementary School is also an Ohio elementary school. And as you can see, they only have 1 star. This particular school, in terms of achievements, and looking at the calculations on the basis of their achievement, here in, I want you to listen to these, this is empirical data. 62% of these children are limited or at the F level. 19% are at the D level. So you have 80% of the children in this elementary school below proficient. So here's where you, in advocacy, you can pair these 2 schools up and ask a critical question, because let's go to the finance and take a look at the finance. Now remember, the other school, in terms of finance, I just want to pull this back up. This school is receiving $6,700 overall, just spending $4,000 in classroom, $2,000 non-classroom. This elementary school is spending $17,000 per pupil, $9,000 in the classroom, and $8,000 on non-classroom issues. So you do have to ask the question, how do you get a reverse where 70%, 80% are above proficient for less money, and 80% are below proficient for more money? So that's a discussion that I think the board's education committee needs to talk about from a policy standpoint, because we have to have a way to explain that it's not always about more money. Sometimes it's, what are you doing with the money, and what's the qualification of the people who are using the money? And that becomes an issue after we determine where our children are achieving. So I bring that up for that reason. So as you can see on both of these, I want to go to gap closing so we can match these up again. On gap closing down here, what you saw was Black students are overperforming in the top 20% at this particular school. And if you go to Taft Elementary School and you go to gap closing, what you find is that here you can see what the gap closing look like. They're actually at 50.7, and it was projected that they would be at 61. So they not only did not meet the low scores, but they got more money for doing that. Now, because we have experience with these particular schools, these are schools that we've been in. So we've gone in and looked at what's going on with the teachers, what's going on with the curriculum, what's going on with administration. But there's an interesting piece here. This is specifically for Dr. Nweze and Mrs. Moore, because of your background in this particular area. I'm going to go to detail here and look at the students. And if you notice here, students with disabilities is 13.7% in East High School. This is a school that's spending $17,000 plus. If you go over in terms of East Garfield, in terms of looking at detail, and you look at the same students with disabilities, you notice the difference. 37% of these students that are performing at this level are students with disabilities. That is a major change. And I think Mrs. Moore and Dr. Nweze, I think you can explain to the team better than I what that really means. When you spend less, you have more students with disabilities, you spend more, you have less students with disabilities, and you fail miserably. So if the two of you could address that just strictly from those numbers standpoint, I would appreciate it.
Go right ahead, Ms. Moore.
All right. I feel that those numbers express expectation. You have to have high expectations for all of the students, but especially for students with disabilities to outperform students, regular students that are less than a mile away that have fallen totally through the cracks and are spending far more money. The Steubenville grade school and high school have teachers that have gone to Steubenville schools, have gone to college, come back, and are now teaching in those schools. The principal knows the families of those children. He says he knows them all by name and by family. Whoever comes to that school, he says he loads those teachers up on the bus and take them through the community so they know where their students come from. And they look at them as family. He said they grow their own and they don't think any less of a student with disabilities than he as he said, the students that are advanced. He says their expectation levels for all of their students are high, and whatever works for students that are advanced, they use the same techniques, the same criteria for those students with disability. That's what makes the difference. When your expectations are low, when you have first year teachers that go in and they do not have master teachers or teachers with experience to work under, they're just stabbing in the dark. They don't know what to do because what they learned in their practicum classes, when you get in the classroom, you can't remember what you learned that was on page 26. You have to have someone there to help you. They don't have curriculum guides when they get to some of the lower performing schools. They don't have support from other staff, and other staff are so negative. They fall into a negative paradigm where all they want to do is put in enough time in order to get out and transfer to a school that is achieving. That's my interpretation. And from having taught for almost 40 years, I know this to be fact.
And I want to join you because everything you have said is certainly absolutely true. And there is nothing like the time that those of us who care, and let me tell you, our children and their parents know exactly what kind of teachers they have. They know that real well. And so as you taught, Ms. Moore, and as I taught and others have taught, nothing beats your investment of time. The children can hit the ceiling, but it will go past the ceiling once they're given an opportunity to open up and learn. We know so many successful people, And when they tell you that they were in special needs classes, you have to look back twice, because it is true. And you can be assured the high quality teachers means everything. And it means everything for regular children who haven't been tested. But certainly for those who have been, you will find test scores that look just like that, because that is what they work on in helping children to reach the top, not to their ability, but beyond. There's so many things that we can go through, but we, at another time, we certainly would love to do that. But please know, I'm so proud of that school too in Ohio that's been successful, because I know what it takes. And this is also an area that as teachers, we spend a lot of time in the neighborhood, in, visiting the homes, working with the parents. I used to have parents who stayed close to the school, and they would ride the bus and drop off at the school and then get back on the bus to go to their jobs. But they came back before they went to work. I didn't really mind whatever time they came, but I certainly wanted them to be involved first, because that's another way that you have got to be sure that your children will succeed and become successful. Okay. If you have questions, I'd be happy to answer.
One of our new guests tonight is Tracy, with those beautiful plants. Tracy, do you have any questions? Are there any questions that you have based upon being here, what you go through, that we can actually expound on? There is a great deal more that's in these report cards. What we're doing is staying true to, number one, what the state requires. Number two, what the NAACP's education committee and policies are driven us to do. What are those standards, and are we meeting and or exceeding those standards in a particular school, and then making sure we know how to get to that data. So I'll give the floor to you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. This is my first time joining. Very informative, and it's really a coincidence because my sister, she lives in Columbus, Ohio. And for y'all to give that data, I'm gonna definitely tell her to check into that. Very interesting. I'm not into the education department background, but I know a lot of principals and assistant principal. Most of my friends are. And I really want to relate the information of how people can look up how the schools are doing, because I never knew that you could go in and look to see how the schools are doing. So I appreciate all of the information that y'all have given tonight, and I will definitely pass it on. But I thank y'all very much for that.
And just based upon what you just said, make sure you get your information. Now, you work with Mrs. White in New York?
I'm from New York, yes.
Okay. Mrs. Christine White is the state education chair in New York, and she's actually a part of the team. They're doing a different piece right as we speak in New York. That was pre-planned, or she would be here. But if you make sure that we have your email, we can email you a copy of the recording, and you can actually share it with those persons. And we would love to have those persons, especially this month, participate. So if you would like to, encourage them to do that, because drilling down in the data is what this historic campaign is about. It is a campaign, it's not a program. It does require you to have the data, to be able to understand the data, to understand how to drill down to get the data, and then how to use the positive best academic practices to advocate in those schools, which you just saw one. One is getting way more money. And when you hear people say we need more money, President Roberts addressed that same issue in a conference that we did at the community college in Youngstown. And, he brought up the issue, maybe they are a little bit more efficient. So I'm going to let President Roberts speak to that, because at that particular conference, the issue of how he addressed that issue, how do we get more money in one place and not in another? And I mentioned to the chairman that how do we do that? How do we have a cogent way to do it? And what are the tangibles and intangibles that are in place? So President Roberts, you addressed that. You're on mute. But if you would get off of mute and explain what you spoke to the educators themselves.
And Jim, I really don't recall, so I'm going to ask you to either tell me or prompt me so I can recall.
Yeah, you had, well, we have just so everyone know, I would switch to it now. We have an interview. You were interviewed on this particular issue. And the issue is the question: how can you have one school that's failing 80% of the kids on these tests, getting $17,000 per pupil and spending twice as much in the classroom, and then you have a different school that's in the top 20% for our kids in 100% poverty school districts, and they're spending almost a third the amount of money and getting the results. So that's kind of where I was going with that. So I will make sure also that I will connect President Roberts, your interview, with this particular video, because I think it was important the way you addressed those issues during the conference. And
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Okay, any other questions? Any of the team members? Mrs. Sidbury, President Brown?
Good evening. Enjoying tonight. Just multitasking, but this information is very informative, and I want the fact that we've been doing this since 2016. You probably already said that every night, but going through this data and dealing with school districts who are trying to lie through statistics is a daunting task, but we are up to it.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you,
And
President
so,
Brown.
and I wanted to echo some of the conversation that has been had. Thank you for joining us tonight, Miss Jacobs. One of the things is when we start looking at the data, because I work with Miss Waters out of New York. New York was probably and is one of the toughest. Every state's data looks different. For example, the report cards in North Carolina do not look like the report cards in Ohio, and vice versa. They are, and when we start digging into the data, we start talking to each other from various states. We start looking at when we talk about individual states' rights and how it relates to what we're trying to say is accountability and what that looks like, it looks different in every state. Now, every state is mandating a test to equate to proficiency, and there are levels that are made along that state. But how the state collects data is another beast within itself. And so looking at school report cards, looking at the data, having those discussions within the branches or with those who are in community with you, that is one of the biggest things. And so it does not look the same. It does not. And so I just wanted to put that out there. It does look very different from state to state.
I want to make one last point on achievements, because we were at a NAACP Education Committee meeting, and one of the board members wanted to know how we were dealing with all in terms of the students. And the reason I wanted to address that is specifically so that the chair has this information and all of the presidents and education chairs and executive committees can know this. So if we look at achievement first, because achievement, as stated in this particular paragraph in the top left, these are all tests given to all children, regardless of whether they're limited, basic, proficient, or above. So this is a composite of all the children that took the test. We then move to gap closing, because what we do want to know is how are our children doing, not necessarily how our children are doing as it relates to white or brown children, but how are they doing compared to the standard expectation that has been set for them. And what we found in Ohio that made them unique is they had academic segregation in integrated schools. And that's a whole different ballgame to get to that level. But you can get that level if you get to the data. And I'm going to, before we close, I'm going to show one particular area. Normally in the Ohio, and they have to do this in every state, it's a question of where it is. But if you look at this particular line here, it says, please see gap closing component technical document. So what we did was we went in the technical document. Mrs. Moore, let me know if this document comes up.
Yes.
Okay. So when it says technical document, what they do is they go in, they define what proficient is, they define what each of the levels are, they give you the calculations on each of the levels, and you have to go through this document to really understand how they do it. But they do break it down, what the performance expectations are, what the annual goals are, what the point system is, what's the student group focus, and how they do that. So in a meeting with the state superintendent and the president of the state board, President Roberts had an opportunity to challenge the people in the data department. And it got to be quite a discussion because he was not getting the answer to the question. They wanted to say that the benchmark was not an expectation. And yet the benchmark is there because they say they calculated, and using the calculations, and Black kids have been behind, so they didn't expect as much. So the word expectation came up in their very answer to the fact that they say they didn't have low expectations. So you will get that kind of information. I know that in Youngstown, as we speak, they're dealing with some of that same sort of thing. But I just wanted to make sure that there are technical papers to look at to see how they create weight. What's the weight of each point? How they, in mathematics, English language arts. And if you look at this particular performance index, annual performance goals by students. So now we have a goal. To get to a goal, you have to have an expectation. To get to the expectation, you have to have empirical data. But if you look at this number here, these are Black students here. And they are, with the exception of students with disabilities, which is a composite of all the students, they have higher expectations of everyone else except the Black students. So when we find Black students that are overperforming, it's not a miracle. It just means that the teachers and the administrators in those particular places did the right thing under the right circumstances and was able to get it done. So I just wanted to bring that up so that we were all aware that these are the things that we're doing right now and documenting this information. And so I want to thank President Roberts, the state conference president, for being on tonight. Ms. Jacobs, I definitely want to make contact with you and the others, and we'll make sure you get a copy of the recording. And Dr. Nweze, we're going to give you the last word as the National Board of Directors Education Committee Chair.
Thank you so much. This has been so exciting. It seems like just a brief time that we've been here, because within this brief time, we put a whirl of discussion within what we were talking about. And I'm particularly excited about the fact that many of us will be looking into as much as we can into what's going on with our schools, and really beginning to understand what are some of the reasons that the schools are not all doing above average and beyond. So I'm excited about it, and I'm hoping that every night we will have an opportunity that we're on, that we'll have an opportunity to talk about the success stories of how those who have achieved exactly what were some of the characteristics that led to it. Because I think it's important to receive those suggestions to take with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Nweze, and that concludes our night. Normally, if there are questions that are deeper that other people may have, but we want to make sure that we cover what's in the proposal in reading and math, how the scores are for our children and all other children, what the benchmarks, goals, or expectations. All three of those are pretty much the same, as you know. And so consequently, we've been able to do that. And I appreciate everyone being on tonight, because it helps us get the message out, get the recording, and make sure the recording is posted, and therefore others can learn from what we're doing and how we're doing it, and in comparison to what's expected from all the units. So again, thank all of you for being here. And Darla, either you or Brother First Vice President Lewis have a statement before we close?
Mr. McWilson, I put my email in the chat, Tracy Jacobs.
Great, thank you very much. Then we'll make sure that you get a copy. As a matter of fact, I will forward to you, with your participation tonight, I will forward to you what was forwarded to the other 30 people or so that's been in over the last couple of days. So you'll see all of the material.
Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. In that case, I will say thank you, everyone. And Dr. Nweze, as Mrs. Moore said, thank you for getting us beyond just the path forward. We are now forward.
Yes.
So now we have to go back and
don't forget, it was us, we.
Yes, yes, yes. Good night, everybody.
Good night.